So in this series of lectures, we're going to look at the evidence of witness M. Witness M is a very important component in the evidence that was used to convict Brendan McConville and his co-defendants John Paul Wooten and Sharon Wooten. He is important for two key reasons, in my view. The first is that witness M corroborates the objective forensic evidence to put Brendan McConville at the scene of Lismore Manor on the 9th of March 2009, in the hours leading up to the shooting of PC Stephen Carroll. The evidence is significant for a second reason, because it corroborates the connection between Brendan McConville and the exhibit which becomes known as HGS/3, which is the jacket found in the boot of the Citroen Saxo vehicle belonging to John Paul Wooten. The jacket, as you will remember, which is covered in particles which the prosecution maintain arise from the shooting of the weapon used to kill Stephen Carroll. When the senior courts come to look at convictions in criminal cases, they are often supplied with court transcripts, and what we have here is a typical example of a court transcript. It is a transcript from the Crown Court in Belfast, where obviously this trial was heard. And it contains all the relevant information about the hearing that the transcript relates to. Clearly, there is the hearing date of the 1st of February 2012, which is the date on which witness M gave their evidence. It has the fact that the court is in Belfast, and it has the name of the judge that heard the case, being Lord Justice Girvan, being the single judge that heard the proceedings. So we're going to look at the two sections of evidence given by witness M. I say the two sections of evidence, really it's two portions of evidence. The first being his examination in chief, and the second being the cross-examination. And all witnesses in criminal proceedings will give examination in chief, but not all will be subject to cross-examination. The examination in chief is the portion of the evidence in which the witness gives the evidence which is helpful to the case for the side that they are being brought for. So witness M is a prosecution witness, and in his examination in chief, he gives the evidence that the prosecution want him to give. The cross-examination is the portion of his evidence in which the examination in chief is subject to testing by the opposing advocates, so the defense advocates in this case. So what we will see as we go through this transcript is firstly an example of an examination in chief, and then secondly an example of a cross-examination. And what we will do is we will consider the techniques deployed by the barristers on both sides, in both sections, because the techniques required for examination in chief, as we'll see, is very, very different to the techniques that are required for a cross-examination. So the examination in chief begins, and witness M is sworn. He provides his, he is sworn into the box, which means he promises to tell the truth and swears on the Holy Bible that he will do so. It gives his oral testimony. The status of evidence being given on oath, which means if he lies in the course of the evidence, he will have committed perjury. He is then asked by the prosecuting barrister, Mr. Murphy, to confirm his personal, well, not all of his personal details, obviously, because he is an anonymized witness, but had witness M been an ordinary witness in a Crown Court, he would have been asked to confirm his personal details. But the prosecuting barrister here simply states that he's going to ask witness M a number of questions. And the prosecuting barrister's questions are going to be open questions. They must be as open as possible. And what that means is that they're not going to be leading questions. And we will see in the course of the questioning how the prosecuting barrister must try and avoid putting words into his witness's mouth. The purpose of an examination in chief is to encourage the witness to give the evidence that you want them to give themselves. It's very important that they themselves say the words, give the evidence that you want them to give. And so that would be undermined if the words that the advocate wants the witness to say were given to him by the prosecuting advocate. And that's why, in general, examination in chief requires the advocate to ask open questions rather than leading ones. So you will see that the first question asked of witness M is, can you tell us when you went to the police? So exactly, the word exactly used were, I want to take you back to when you went to the police in relation to this matter. Can you just tell us when that was and what the circumstances were? Now, just to drill down, it's interesting that there is one respect in which this is a leading question. And we'll consider which aspect of this question is leading and which aspect of it is open. So I want to take you back to when you went to the police in relation to this matter. That aspect of the question is in fact leading because it leads the witness on the fact that they did go to the police in the first place. Had this been an entirely open question, the prosecuting barrister may have begun with, is it true that you went to the police in relation to this incident? And then the witness could have answered yes. But because it's absolutely abundantly clear that this witness would have had to have gone to the police in order for him to be before the court at all, it's appropriate for the prosecuting barrister to begin with, I want to take you back to when you went to the police in relation to this matter, and then ask the very open question, which is, can you tell me when that was and what the circumstances were? So witness M confirms that he went to the police around the 14th or 15th of February 2010. And obviously that's almost a year after the shooting of PC Stephen Carroll in March 2009. And that is a relevant detail for our purposes. He's asked what prompted him to go to the police. And witness M appeals to a couple of occasions. The first being that there was a letter sent by the police for anybody with information on the night of the murder. And then the second, which is the more important for our purposes, is that witness M describes being threatened. And it was after being threatened, witness M says, that he decided to go to the police. Now, the prosecuting barrister does not dive into the circumstances of witness M being threatened at this stage. He invites him back to the events of the 9th of March. And he's given a series of aerial photographs that depict the scene of the shooting, which will be important to him and to his account. Now, witness M on the night of the 9th of March describes how he decided to go for a walk, that he emerged from an area known as Hillcrest Manor, that he went for the walk at around 7-ish, that he left from his own home, that he was walking with his partner, his 2 children, and a dog. And then he is taken through the route and asked to describe the route in relation to numbers that have been set onto the aerial photographs. Obviously, we are not looking at the same aerial photographs, but luckily they make an appeal to some place names. And the first is Drumbeg North. So you'll remember Drumbeg from an earlier video, Drumbeg being the Catholic housing estate situated next door to Lismore Manor. And Drumbeg is divided into obviously Drumbeg North and Drumbeg South. So he talks about passing a recreation centre and a library, and his intention was to travel through to Drumbeg North. And he describes the conditions as being dark and miserable, that there were street lights on. And if you remember back to our first talk, you'll remember that the pathway at the rear of Lismore Manor is lined with street lights. So that's a relevant detail. He says it's been drizzling. It had been drizzling in the hours around his walk, and it started and stopped, and that he was familiar with the route that he was taking. So, without getting too drawn into the detail of his route, we eventually arrives at a highly relevant location in the context of this case, which is the electrical box at the bottom of Drumbeg South. And you will remember from the photographs we looked at in our first video that there is captured in those photographs an electric box of the type that Witness M describes. And he goes on to describe an electric box painted green, white, and orange, the colours of the Irish flag. And there were just a few people hanging around. Now, this is a very important point of his evidence. He goes on to say that there were 5 people hanging around the electric box in Drumbeg South, and that they were all stocky men. Let's break that down. All stocky build, and they were all men. And he was still walking at the time. And as he was walking along the path, he describes how a little pickup truck was coming down from Drumbeg South onto the path and drove past very slowly. And he says that he identifies on the aerial photograph the point exactly where he was, in between markers 5 and 6. And he then says that he was at specifically point number 5, which is the one, the marker closest to Lismore Manor. He then goes on to describe the vehicle, which is a little pickup truck, low back, white cab, blue sides. There's a tiny light that was on the top of it, and it was full of brambles and bushes and stuff that had been cut. So quite a specific and detailed description of the pickup truck, quite a specific and detailed description of the number of people, and at least some physical characteristics of the individuals that were stood at the electricity box, specifically that they were male, there were 5 or 6 of them, and they were stocky. He describes that in the front of the truck were a driver and a passenger, and that he ignored it and just carried on walking. He says that he was not able to see the driver of the truck. He then describes the truck moving away from where the 5 or 6 people were standing. He then describes the truck stopping, the passenger getting out and going round to the side of the round to the driver's side of the vehicle and climbing up into the driver's side. So we can imagine that the driver has now exited the vehicle. And he says, interestingly, that he'd actually seen the truck before, that he'd seen it in the Drumbeg area, specifically in the Drumbeg South area. The prosecuting barrister then takes him back to the people that he says he observed around the area of the electricity box and says that he was initially, when he saw them initially, there were 5 people. So if we just look at that specifically. If I could just go back to the people that you say you observed in the area of the electricity box. You said that when you saw them initially, there were 5 people. Is that right? He then describes how 2 of them had walked away up in towards Drumbeg and the other 2 turned around like with their back to me. So there are 2 people left at the electricity box. And the most important section of his evidence is when he identifies, here at page 10, at line 10, that the person left standing and facing him was Brendan McConville. Now, Brendan McConville is someone that Witness M says he's known for a long time. He says it's hard to put a number of years on how long he's known Brendan McConville, but he says it was since he was very young. And he says that he had a nickname which was Yandie, Y-A-N-D-I-E. And then at line 26 and 25, he's asked what was Brendan McConville wearing, and he replies, a green army jacket. He says that Brendan McConville said hello, and that he used witness M's Christian name when he said hello to him. Now, this is absolutely fundamental evidence for the prosecution case because it places Brendan McConville at the scene of Lismore Manor in the lead up to the shooting, wearing a green jacket, which was later found in the Citroen Saxo, covered in particles which they say arise from the shooting of the weapon that killed Stephen Carroll. So in the next video, we're going to turn to the next section of the transcript, which deals with the cross-examination of this witness and consider the different techniques that are used to test the evidence that has been given in chief. Thank you very much.